You remember the first time you got paid for something you used to do for free? It felt like a victory, validation, proof that your time was finally worth something. But then something strange happened. You sat down to do the thing you once loved, and the feeling was gone. The spark had vanished. You had just become a case study in one of psychology's most unsettling discoveries. It is called the overjustification effect. The overjustification effect is the reason passion turns into a chore. It explains why a hobby becomes a job you dread. It takes something you do for the pure joy of it and replaces that joy with a transaction. This is not a metaphor. This is a measurable, repeatable, scientifically proven hijacking of your brain's reward system. To understand how this works, you have to understand why you do anything at all. Psychologists split motivation into two clean buckets. The first bucket is intrinsic motivation. You draw because drawing feels good. You run because the movement clears your mind. The activity is the reward. There is no external payoff. The second bucket is extrinsic motivation. You work for a paycheck. You study for a grade. The activity is just a bridge to something else. Your brain handles these two types of motivation in completely different ways. They use different neural pathways. They trigger different chemicals. And here is the dangerous part. They do not simply add together. Extrinsic rewards do not sit nicely on top of intrinsic joy. The external reward can actively consume the internal drive. It eats it alive. The most famous demonstration of this came from Stanford University in 1973. Mark Lepper, David Greene, and Richard Nisbett designed an experiment that seems almost cruel in its simplicity. They went into a preschool and watched children. They identified the kids who naturally chose to draw during free play. These were children who drew for the sheer love of it, intrinsic motivation in its purest form. The researchers split these children into three groups. The first group was the expected award group. An adult showed each child a shiny certificate with a gold seal and a ribbon. The adult said, "If you draw for me right now, you will get this good player award." The child drew. The child received the award. The second group was the unexpected award group. The adult asked the child to draw. The child drew. Then, to the child's surprise, the adult handed them the award afterward. No deal was ever mentioned. The third group was the control group. The child drew. No award was promised or given. 2 weeks later, the researchers returned. They watched the children during free play and measured how much time each child spent drawing when no one was asking. The results rewrote textbooks. The unexpected award group drew just as much as before. The control group drew just as much as before, but the expected award group drew less, significantly less. Their drawing time dropped by nearly half. The children promised a reward were now less interested in drawing than the children who received nothing. The external reward had not motivated them. It had paid off their intrinsic desire. Think about what just happened inside those young brains. Before the experiment drawing was pure expression, a child sat down with markers because making something felt like reward enough. Then an adult introduced a contract. Draw, and you get the certificate. The brain silently recategorized the activity. Drawing was no longer play. Drawing was now work that happened to pay in shiny paper. The moment the contract disappeared, the brain applied a simple logic. No payment, no output. The intrinsic circuit had been shorted out. This is not limited to children. Psychologist Edward Deci asked college students to solve a block puzzle called Soma. The students who were paid for their time spent less of their free break continuing to play with the puzzle than the students who were never paid. The paid group had learned that puzzle solving was a job. Unpaid students learned nothing of the sort, and their curiosity remained intact. The moment money entered the room, curiosity walked out. Your brain is constantly asking itself a silent question: why am I doing this? If the answer is because I enjoy it, the activity gets filed under passion, dopamine flows freely, you enter flow states, time dissolves. But if the answer is because I am being paid or because I need the grade, the activity gets filed under obligation, The brain now sees the task as a cost. Dopamine dries up. You have to force yourself to do what you once chased. This explains why turning your hobby into a side hustle feels so dangerous. At first, it feels like a dream. You love baking, and someone offers you $30 for a dozen cookies. Your brain lights up. You are being paid to do what you love. But over time, the intrinsic joy of measuring flour and watching dough rise is slowly replaced by the dread of fulfilling orders. You now bake not because you want to, but because you have to. Your clients expect it. The money depends on it. Your brain asks, why am I doing this? And the answer is now external. The passion has been overjustified. The same pattern shows up in education. A student who devours books for pleasure enters a school system that awards gold stars for every finished title. Reading becomes a points game. The student stops picking up books during summer break. Why would they? There are no stars to earn. The system has taught a child that reading is for external credit, not internal enrichment. Years later, that same student wonders why they can never seem to read for fun anymore. They were not lazy, they were overjustified. Even your relationships are not immune. Consider what happens when a couple moves in together and splits all chores into a formal rotation. Trash duty on Tuesday, dishes on Thursday. What was once a small act of care becomes a monitored obligation. You start keeping score. You start noticing when the other person falls short. The intrinsic desire to serve someone you love got replaced by an external enforcement system. What makes the overjustification effect so insidious is that it wears a mask. It looks like good sense. It looks like efficiency. Pay people for their work. Reward students for their effort. These all sound like smart systems. And in the short term, they do work. The promise of a reward reliably gets people to perform the action, but the hidden cost accumulates silently. You get the behavior today at the expense of the desire tomorrow. Neuroimaging studies show what this looks like inside the skull. When people perform an intrinsically motivated task, their anterior insula and striatum activate in patterns that signal self-directed satisfaction. The brain is saying, this feels right. This is mine. When an external reward is introduced, the activation shifts toward the ventral striatum, which processes expected rewards. The task becomes a means to an end. Over time, the anterior insula activation diminishes. The brain literally stops registering the activity as inherently pleasurable. The joy circuit has gone dark. There is one critical distinction that can save you. It matters enormously whether the reward is perceived as controlling or informational. A controlling reward says, do this and you will get that. It is a leash. An informational reward says, here is feedback on how you did. It is a mirror. If you finish a painting and someone says, this is genuinely beautiful, here is why that praise reinforces your intrinsic identity as a painter. But if that same person had said, before you started, I will pay you $50 if you paint something beautiful, the brush would feel heavier in your hand before you even dipped it in color. This is why the language you use with yourself matters. When you sit down to work on a project, ask yourself, why am I doing this? If the answer begins with, because I have to, your motivation is already decaying. Reframe the answer towards something internal. I am doing this because I want to see if I can solve the problem. I am doing this because the process of making something is satisfying. These reframes do not remove external pressures, but they remind your brain that the action still belongs to you. Some of the most successful creators in the world have internalized this without knowing the name for it. They deliberately keep a portion of their work unmonetized. They paint on weekends and never post the results. They write in a journal no one will ever read. They code a small, dumb app that will never go on the App Store. This is not a waste of time. This is immune system maintenance for the intrinsic drive. You cannot undo the effect by simply wanting to. Knowing that the overjustification effect exists does not automatically restore your lost passion. But you can create spaces in your life where no one is watching and no one is paying. You can carve out hours where the only reason you do the thing is that you chose to stop tracking it, stop optimizing it, stop posting about it. Let the action be the only reward. The part of you that once loved something for no reason at all is still in there. It has just been buried under a pile of certificates and external expectations. Dig it out. Tonight, when you sit down to do the thing you once loved, do not ask what it is worth. Ask only if it feels like yours. The spark was never really gone. It was just waiting for you to stop paying yourself to find it.